Hey, welcome everyone. Thank you for being here. My name is Dan Stradtman. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer of Bloomfire, and we're really pleased that you've joined us today. You know, organizations are rethinking what knowledge needs to do at their company. It's not just about storing information or making it easily searchable anymore. Knowledge has to remain reliable. It has to drive those faster answers. It has to help people act with confidence and scale effectively across teams and different geographies. So, in today's session, we're going to try to bring that to life through four key innovations that we have here at Bloomfire. One is around content reliability. The second is our Synapse AI. The third is something we call learn and confirm. And the last are language localization capabilities. I'm joined here by David Flach, our product marketer, and Samir Kothavale, our VP of product. And together, we're going to show you what these capabilities are, why they matter, and what they look like in action. So, bit of rules of the road as we go forward. Feel free to submit your questions in the Q&A chat as we go. We'll try to get to them. And whatever questions we don't answer, we'll be sure to follow up with following this session. This session is being recorded, and we'll share it at the conclusion of today's session. So let's dive in. We're going to start with content reliability, which is a foundational part of our self-healing knowledge base. The challenge with most knowledge bases is that they don't stay clean on their own. So as content grows, it becomes harder and harder to manage. You get duplicate information, things get outdated, there's inconsistent publishing, and over time, that really erodes trust and employee confidence in the knowledge. And now, with AI layered on top of all this information, content quality matters even more. Because if the underlying content isn't reliable, the AI generated responses won't be either. So, David, I'm going to start with a question to you that many are probably asking. What does a self-healing knowledge base actually look like in practice?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think the right one for everybody to be thinking, because it is a little abstract. In practice, a self-healing knowledge base goes beyond simply storing content. It actively helps keep the content clean, current, and trustworthy, especially over time. Rather than rewriting content, what Bloomfire does is we're empowering our customers to address the issues that undermine the trust that you were talking about, Dan. And that's typically the duplicate and conflicting information within knowledge in a community. And we do that so the right people can access the right information at the right time. And that's a big shift to how most organizations are managing this today. Today, if a content audit happens, it's extraordinarily manual and incredibly time consuming. Duplicate detection is reactive and oftentimes is identified or flagged by a mistake or by an accident that happened, just happening to fall into identifying that. And now conflicting knowledge is something a little bit more challenging and maybe even impossible to audit. How does one person or one team capture the intent or the context of several thousand documents and then identify what might conflict another? Typically, conflicting information is only found when there's a problem. And by the time there's a problem, it's just too late. So even if you're a knowledge management superstar and you complete the audit and your reviews and you're reviewing and you're executing the required updates, oftentimes that's managed through spreadsheets, reminders, calendars, nudges, Slacks, Teams, pings, letters, you name it. It's a very manual process of holding all that together. And by the way, all of that hard work is really great, but it's only reflective up until the moment in time that you started the audit. And so, this time next year, next month, next quarter, all the new content that you've published, you're going to have to go through the same exact process for the entire knowledge base the next time around.
Yeah, very true. Samir, as our VP of product, I know you're thinking about this not just from a feature standpoint, but from, bigger overall product strategy. Why is this such an important area for Bloomfire to invest in?
Yeah, trust is a pillar of our product strategy, and you can't build a trustworthy AI product on top of content with quality issues. Through our experience building AI chatbots and agents, we saw firsthand that underlying content quality issues, such as duplicates, contradictions, and stale information, were a big problem. AI doesn't smooth over those problems; it amplifies them, and bad inputs produce confidently wrong outputs. And so the strategic question for us wasn't should we invest in content quality? It was how do we make this automatic? Most organizations are managing this manually today with periodic audits, spreadsheets, and the worst thing would be someone just noticing that something is off. So this doesn't really scale, and it certainly doesn't keep pace with how quickly things change. Content reliability is our answer to that. It's the foundation of the self-healing knowledge base, a system that actively surfaces issues so teams can act on them rather than waiting for problems to surface on their own. We believe you shouldn't have to choose between growing your knowledge base and maintaining confidence in it.
Oh man, I really love your comment of bad inputs produce confidently wrong outputs. I don't think truer words have been spoken. So, Samir, as you bring up the demo, I'll give our viewers a little bit of context as to the community that we're going to be showing these features in today as part of our discussion. So, the Acme community is not run by Wile E. Coyote, but it is built to give an example of a common use case that Bloomfire addresses, and that is customer support teams and their ability to quickly access the right answers and knowledge to serve their customers. And in this case, Acme is actually a financial services or banking organization. So a lot of our examples are going to come from that specific industry. But Samir, with that, I will turn it over to you to take us through the self-healing knowledge base.
Great. So let's jump into the knowledge base health module. And the dashboard gives us an overview of the issues that have been identified. And so here we've got 19 duplicates and 9 contradictions or conflicts. So what's happening behind the scenes and the way this product works is we have AI agents running in the background, constantly scanning the knowledge base. And this scans every time content is created or updated, and it's looking for duplicates or conflicts, and then they're highlighting that into this interface. And we are assigning that to the author or subject matter expert, and that person will then get a notification. So as an owner, I can kind of see everything here, and so we can kind of see the entire list of issues that have been identified. But for the purpose of the demo, let's dive in and kind of filter for just myself to kind of show what the experience would be like as a user that's coming in here. So I've got two different issues. I've got a duplicate and I've got a conflict. Let's dive into each of these and explore what's been identified. So we'll start with a duplicate. And duplicates are bad, of course, because it just creates confusion. When users see 2 different posts on the same topic, they may not even go any further. They might just actually go and ask someone for help. And so it's really important for us to reduce these duplicates. Furthermore, AI can also get confused when you have a lot of duplicative content. So what we see here, this is the page that shows the underlying issue. And what we do is we show a side-by-side of the 2 documents that are duplicates. And we can scroll through and actually read each of these pieces of information. But what we also have is a very simple explanation that the system has generated. And so not only has it flagged this issue, but it also gives us an explanation as to what it believes the reason is for this duplicate designation. And so if we read through this, it basically is telling us that these two documents are covering identical requirements and they share the same core purpose. And so this is where we hand off the responsibility to a human. And in this case, the author or the subject matter expert to take a look and determine whether this is truly a duplicate or not. And so in this case, let's make the assumption that the support sheet and the customer-facing information, these are two different pieces of content that we want to have. And so perhaps the author will want to just make these a little bit more differentiated. So the customer-facing content is just a little bit more customer-friendly, and the support sheet can remain a little bit more technical. And so maybe this is just a good reminder to the author to make those changes and differentiate these two pieces of content a bit more, and maybe link back to the support sheet. Alternatively, we might read through this and we might say, well, this is maybe a false positive, and this is actually perfectly fine. And perhaps this support sheet has some technical details that differentiate it from this customer-facing document. And so what we can do is we can teach the system to prevent this type of notification in the future. And it's not by fine-tuning the LLM, it's actually by providing rules to the system that all live within our VPC. They're not shared with the LLM. So the way that we do that is by clicking this button, which says improve reasoning. And so I can say something like, support sheets can duplicate customer-facing content as long as there are some additional technical details. And of course, typos are okay, it'll figure it out. So by adding this information in, it's going to process it and generate a rule and prevent this type of issue from occurring, not just for this pair of documents, but across the knowledge base. So going back, let's take a look at the conflict. And conflicts are even more dangerous because we're providing two different pieces of information that contradicts themselves. Obviously, that can give the end user incorrect information if they pick the wrong piece of information. And with AI, we don't know which one it's going to pick. It could pick one, or it could actually combine the two of them together and just give an incorrect answer. So let's dive into this one here. So this is a great example where we are pulling in Confluence, and we also have native content in Bloomfire, and we're able to compare the two of them together. In this case, we've identified an issue, and the generated summary here says that the document from Confluence states a 72-hour sync time, and the document from the internal community has a 24-hour sync time. So it's really up to the author or the subject matter expert to make the decision on what to do here. Now, let's say I'm not the right person to make that decision. This actually should be decided by an engineer. Well, I can come in here and I can reassign this to Tad. Tad's the expert on this particular synchronization, and he will get a notification. He'll then be able to come into this portal and be able to make the decision on what to do here. So our vision behind the self-healing knowledge base starts with content reliability. But we are planning a number of additional capabilities over the next couple of quarters. We've got moderation coming very soon. Moderation is a process by which we enable a set of approvers to approve content before it hits the knowledge base. Multi-step approval process with a lot of AI built into it. Secondly, we have content review, which is the ability for our authors and admins to more quickly and efficiently go through all the content and verify that each one is actually still current and approved. And then finally, knowledge gaps. Knowledge gaps is a feature that enables the system to go through all the search and AI queries and determine what queries and what searches resulted in no answer or a low relevance answer, and then highlight that to admins so that they can invest in the content and either add or edit content to address those gaps in the knowledge base. So it's the combination of these features that will help ensure that your content is up to date, complete, and free of quality issues.
Samir, thanks so much for that demo. Really exciting and differentiating features, and we're so excited that our customers are going to be able to leverage these. So, maybe moving to the next topic, as we think about content reliability, the goal isn't just to have cleaner content for its own sake. What you're really doing is creating that strong foundation for how people and how AI finds and trusts and uses knowledge every day. So that's where our next capability comes in, Synapse. So Synapse is Bloomfire's next generation conversational AI experience. And this is designed to help teams move beyond that traditional search and be able to get clear, trusted, and in some cases, detailed answers from company knowledge faster than they've ever been able to do it before. And I do think that this starts with an important point, right? Most teams already have some search functionality. They type in a keyword, they might get a list of documents back, they might even get an answer, but a lot of times they're hunting and trying to make sure that it's right or it's the correct one. And that's the issue, right? You're still having to hunt for it, verify it, and that takes up time. So I'm going to go over to David now, and maybe the most obvious question here is, what's your take on, as teams moving away from search, and why isn't that enough?
Yeah, and Dan, I think you got to it there. It's like search. What search addresses is access. It does not address effort. And so people are able to find documents, or at least able to search for them. Hopefully they can find them. But what they really need is clarity. They need the answer and what matters most, what changed, what version is right, what to do next in a situation. And with traditional search, you still have to go into the document, scour for information, and turn that into the thing that you're looking for. To summarize, search returns documents and not clear answers. So what happens, employees open multiple files, and if you're not using Bloomfire, that could mean, first of all, trying to find the right document. Is it the one titled final_v2.edit, or is it the one that's final_v1? Who knows? And once you do pick a document, then you need to scan through it, and you need to compare it. Maybe you're comparing final v1 versus final v2 edit, and try to understand what's together, piece it together, and then take that information and drop it into an email or a slide deck, or whatever output you're ultimately trying to achieve. And then even after doing all of that, you still may not be able to fully and confidently say that you found the right version or the right answer. And so what do you do if you're not confident? You might tap someone on the shoulder or send them a message and say, hey, this is what I found, this is what I put together, is this right? And what that does is that leaves your experts answering the same question over and over again. And so, Samir, I've heard you talk about this quite a bit, and I'll let you expand. But even when the information technically exists somewhere, employees still end up interrupting experts because of the effort that it takes to find and apply the knowledge is just too great.
Yeah, the goal of Synapse is to address this very issue, moving beyond search that simply surfaces information towards an experience that delivers clarity, confidence, and the appropriate action in the moment of need. So there's two principles that guide how we built this feature. The first is accuracy. Synapse identifies the right content, whether it lives in text, images, video, and it grounds its answer based on your knowledge base. Additionally, we apply techniques specifically to reduce hallucinations. The second is explainability. Every answer includes citations that link back to the source content, and that enables users to be able to verify the answers. In Q2, we're going to be expanding on this further, such that citations will actually highlight the exact passage within the source post, all within one interface. So you don't have to jump between different screens.
Yeah, Samir, that's awesome. One of the other trends I think we've started to see among customers and in the market is, they may want to develop their own proprietary AI chatbots or interfaces. And in some cases, those might be a homegrown system, right? That's done by IT, or maybe it's a pre-built capability, like something Amazon Q comes to mind. So, Samir, how is Bloomfire addressing those organizational needs where they want their developers to be able to bring that trusted knowledge and generative AI capability directly into these other applications that their teams or departments may already be using?
Yeah, first, Bloomfire has a set of pre-built connectors with a variety of external tools. So we connect with Amazon Q, Amazon S3, Teams, Slack, Salesforce, a variety of other ones. So our customers can take advantage of our AI capabilities out of the box in any of those applications. Secondly, Bloomfire also gives developers the ability to build their own tools with our APIs and offer a great AI-powered experience in a secure, scalable way without having to build it all themselves. Coming soon, we'll also have an MCP connector, so customers can then connect their AI agents or third-party chatbot tools to Bloomfire. What all that means is that no matter where you are using Bloomfire out of the box, one of our many third-party apps, or building your own tools, you'll get the advantage of embedded answers backed by trusted knowledge, structured search, and contextual intelligence into workflows without having to rebuild permissions, indexing, or knowledge infrastructure from scratch. David, why don't you take us into the Synapse demo?
Yeah, a few things to highlight as I pull up my screen here. First, I want to just emphasize, Synapse is conversational. Users can ask questions in an organic way and continue follow-ups in the same thread. Second, Synapse can reason across multiple pieces of content, which is critical because company knowledge rarely lives in just one place. And third, the output is designed to be useful. So whether that's a summary, a key takeaway, a list, a table, all of that is designed to be useful and actionable, and instead of just a set of search results. So here we have the Synapse homepage, the Synapse experience. And this is where we start our conversation. And so as Dan mentioned, in this Acme Corporation community, we have quite a bit of information about credit unions and financial institutions. And so let's find out what types of personal checking accounts are offered. So we'll ask the query, and Synapse will come back, and it says Acme offers 4 types of personal checking accounts. We have Acme Basic, Advantage, Premium, and Student. And then a little bit more information here about, there's differences to them. And so I can understand that this information is being pulled from these 2 sources. So we have checking account comparison and conversion guide, and opening a personal checking account, which are contributions within our community. Now, as I mentioned, this is conversational. So we can ask a direct follow-up question without providing the additional context. So I can say, how do these features compare? And I'm not necessarily asking how do the features of the particular, checking accounts compare. I'm just asking context for what we started on, and Synapse knows that we're talking about these checking accounts. So here we have a quick summary on Basic, Acme Advantage, Acme Premium, and Acme Student, all broken down in this easy to understand bulleted format. So you're probably thinking, this is great for answering questions. This is what I would expect. But how does Synapse help employees get work done faster? And I think the answer is that we take the question to answer and we turn it into output and action. So instead of stopping it, here's the answer, we can use Synapse to go a step further. And so let's say that I am an Acme support rep, and I'm on a chat with one of my members. And I want Synapse to help me draft something that summarizes the premium account. So I'll ask Synapse to do that. And so here I have something that's very easy. It says our Acme Premium checking account is designed for members who want to maximize benefits and flexibility and so on. So I can take this, I can click the copy button, and I can paste this directly into my chat of choice, or the chat that I have going with that member. Now, I'll pause there. So all of this, and maybe your eyes are wondering, all of this has been done in fast mode. We also have thinking mode, which is designed more for complex questions, comparisons, analysis, whereas fast mode is really designed more for fact-based questions. So if I reset the context here, I want to switch over to thinking mode, and I want to ask about comparing sending wire transfers to Mexico versus other countries. And I want a table that includes 5 other countries and what that process might look like. So I'll have Synapse start that query. And again, I selected thinking mode. So what Synapse is doing is it's going to scan the entire knowledge base just as it would in fast mode, but it's going to spend time to compare the documents, to compare the posts, and create the analysis that I'm looking for. So it might take just a few extra seconds to do this. And you can see it's just about ready to give me my response. And the goal of this is really to help you go that step further and apply the knowledge and not just access it. So here we have our table that I requested for Mexico, Canada, France, Germany, Spain, and the UK. All of this information presented to me in this very clean table where I have sort of the key columns here for fees, forms needed, cutoff times, currency options, and so on. And then you'll see I also get some clarifying notes that will be helpful for me as I look to understand exactly what the differences are here. And if I expand upon the sources, I can see that this came from 4 key sources. So there's 4 documents within our community that are talking about any number of, any element of the information that was presented from Synapse here. I'll shift gears slightly and talk about this additional feature. I'll clear the context once again. And we have this ability to filter. And so if you're not familiar, Bloomfire has what we call groups. And what groups are basically restricted access areas where content is only accessible to those who have permissions to view it. So you can limit the context that Synapse will look at for those specific groups that you have access to. Obviously, you're not able to look into the leadership group if you don't have access to the leadership group. But if you do, you could use Synapse to, provide talking points for an upcoming meeting, or summarize a key document within a knowledge, within a post about Q3 results, whatever it might be. The last thing I'll mention on Synapse is a really important element of what we've built. Synapse is equipped with what's called temporal reasoning. And then don't feel bad if you're like, David, what in the world is temporal reasoning? I was once like you too. It sounds complex, but it's simply that Synapse is time aware. And being time aware, it doesn't mean that Synapse knows that, it's whatever time it is. It means that Synapse understands that we're in April of 2026. And that matters when your team wants the most up-to-date information. So let's look at an example. We mentioned that Acme serves credit unions, but in this community, we also have customer support for a short-term rental company. And so I'm going to ask, when do I need to respond to guest messages? And Synapse is going to search our knowledge base, and it's going to say, you need to respond within 30 minutes during local daytime hours. And I can see that that's coming from the ground rules that were set in 2026. Now, I happen to know that there were also ground rules in 2024 that we had posted that are in the knowledge base. And if you were paying really close attention, you may have seen this in Samir's demo for conflicting knowledge. So let's see how this has changed since 2024. So I can see that in 2024, hosts were expected to respond within 1 hour. And in 2026, that changed to 30 minutes. So again, like I said, if you were paying close attention, you saw this as conflicting knowledge in Samir's demo. Even though he didn't use this example, this did exist after I created that new guideline in 2026. Pretty cool. All right, so wrapping this up, we built Synapse to prioritize trusted retrieval, transparent answers, and practical verification. And this ties back to everything we covered in the last section with content reliability. It helps ensure that the underlying foundation is clean, and Synapse helps you unlock the knowledge faster and turn it into action. And the two of those things really reinforce each other. I think the cleaner and more reliable the knowledge foundation is, the better Synapse can perform. And the better Synapse can perform, the easier it is for employees to trust and use the knowledge in their day-to-day work. So once employees can find trusted answers and turn knowledge into action quickly, the next question is, how do you know if they've actually absorbed the content that I'm putting out there? And that's where Learn and Confirm comes in.
Yeah, thanks, David. What we call Learn and Confirm gets at a problem I think a lot of organizations have run into at some point. You know, just because you're publishing something, sending it, doesn't mean that people actually read it. And even if they do read it, they may not fully understand it or absorb that information. A lot of teams say, oh, you know, we sent the policy or we posted an update. But when it comes time to answer the question, did employees actually acknowledge it? Did they understand it? Can they prove it? That's where things can get much less clear. So, David, I'll kick it back to you. Let's start there. How can teams ensure that their employees aren't just, passing by the content and, reading it and understanding it?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, for a long time, the workflow is basically stopped at publication. Teams publish a policy or a compliance update, and then the assumption is that the job is done because the content's available and people are going to read it. But availability is not the same thing as confirmation. We've heard from customers, their views, views are not the same. Views are not enough when it comes to things like HR and compliance and operations. You need to know not just if the post existed, you need to know who accessed it, who read it, and who acknowledged actually reading that content. So without a formal way to confirm that engagement, teams ended up relying on email follow-ups or spreadsheets, separate training tools, manual reporting, just to answer the question of who completed this, and who didn't. And that's inefficient. And it also limits Bloomfire's ability to support compliance and governance and learning use cases in a more complete way.
So it brings up an interesting point. I mean, there are a lot of different, tools, platforms out there that, say they can do this and are kind of, purpose built for it. Samir, from your perspective, why is this an important problem for Bloomfire to solve?
Yeah, our customers don't just want to distribute knowledge. They really need to know with confidence that critical information landed with their user base. And this distinction matters a lot, especially in compliance-heavy and distributed organizations. Publishing a policy update and confirming that the right people read it, understood it, and completed it are very different things. And without a built-in mechanism to close that loop, teams end up stitching together follow-up emails, spreadsheets, separate learning systems just to answer this basic governance question. So we really wanted to make accountability feel native to the experience and not bolted on. So Learn and Confirm lives inside Bloomfire. It's tied to the content itself, and it's not a separate training portal that adds friction. So this is a deliberate design choice.
So yeah, there's two main pieces to Learn and Confirm. And Samir will show these here in a second. But the first the first is acknowledgements. And that's sort of a simple read and acknowledge workflow where a user confirms that they've read and understood a post by checking a box. And the second is quizzes. And those are short, multiple choice questions that are attached to a post so teams can verify the comprehension versus just the exposure. And together, those give administrators a much more definitive way to track whether the critical information was received and understood. Admins can see who completed them, who hasn't, and then what happened after that. So it becomes much easier to measure participation and create an audit-ready record. If you think about compliance training, annual policy acknowledgements, onboarding confirmations, product and pricing updates, leadership communications, all of those might require a sign-off that you've understood the changes. And these are all cases where organizations, they need more than general engagement metrics. They need a clear record, especially if you're asked to prove it later in some sort of audit. And that is the reason this matters so much. It improves the auditability and the readiness without forcing teams into a more fragmented workflow. Samir, I teed you up. You want to walk us through the workflow?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So let's start with the end user experience. So as an end user, and you've been assigned one of these Learn and Confirm quizzes or acknowledgements, you'll get a notification. You click on that notification, it takes you to the post where you'll obviously be able to read everything that's within this post here, digest it, and then you have to take this quiz. And as you can see here, it says that it's due on April 29th. So all this is customizable. Let's go ahead and take this quiz. There's a couple questions here about factors that impact your credit score. So I'm just going to make some guesses here around these answers. And we'll see that we got a 2 out of 3. It says try again because they're expecting us to get all 3 out of 3 correct. So just a quick example of what one of these quizzes looks like and the kind of the end user experience. But let's dive into it on the admin side. This is our dashboard. This kind of shows us everything that has been created, that has been assigned to a piece of content. So the one that we were looking at is right here. And let's take a look. We'll start with analytics. So if we click in on this, we can see everyone that was assigned. There are 29 people assigned to this particular quiz. And if we scroll down, we can see that this is me. And on April 2nd, which is today, I tried to take this quiz and it's incomplete. I was not able to pass it. And we can see the status for every single user that's been assigned. And we also know kind of who's past due, and we can follow up with those users with additional notifications. So one important thing to note here is that we have a lot of granularity around assignment. So we can click on assign users, and we can explicitly assign specific users to this quiz. I can type in a specific user's name. So for example, Tad, and I can add him. I can add people by role. So I can say learners. And this would give me all of the learners in the community. And I can also do it by group. So I can search for the tier 2 support team, for example, and I can add all of these users. And for each set of users that I add, I can give them their own start and end date. So in this case, perhaps I'm going to onboard these users a little bit later, and I want them to start on the 21st and complete on the 30th. for example. I can assign those users and they would get added to this list. Additionally, I'll just go and show what the creation process looks like. It's super customizable. And this is the interface that a author can use to generate these quizzes. So we can set a passing grade threshold. In this case, it was pretty strict. I had to answer all 3 correct. So I can lower that down to 2. So in this case, I would need to answer 2 out of 3 correct. I can add questions very easily by clicking on this button. And I can reorder questions, right, very easily. There's 2 types of questions. We have a single select and a multi-select. A single select has 1 correct answer, and a multi-select, I can select multiple options that are correct. So at a high level, this is how the process works to create these quizzes. Acknowledgements are another more simple type of learn and confirm. That is just basically a very simple binary acknowledgement that you read the content. David, I'll hand it back to you.
Yeah, and when I've talked to customers, and hopefully what's resonating with you is, there's really three things there that I think stand out. And one is that clear accountability. Teams want to know who completed something and who didn't. Second is the reduction on manual tracking. So our customers are, they don't want to be stitching together emails or other records to maintain a spreadsheet or some sort of system of record. They want this available in one spot. And the last is easier audits. So having the verifiable record of the acknowledgement and the comprehension check, it was needed for stronger governance and compliance readiness. So it's simple, it's integrated. Users don't have to jump into a separate system to just to confirm that they read a key piece of knowledge or complete a short quiz. It happens right where the knowledge already lives.
Thanks, guys. That's a great look at it, great overview. Certainly, we know that publishing does not equal comprehension, and these new tools with Learn and Confirm really give our customers a way to move beyond that kind of passive distribution and into a more measurable way of understanding. And so we just I think we're in a good place, because ultimately, and Samir brought it up, if you're in a heavily regulated industry, or you're in an industry that requires a lot of compliance, this is going to mean easier audits. It's going to mean clearer accountability and a much stronger link between communication and understanding. And we're in an AI world now, and I think this is another element to how that underlying foundational knowledge and getting people to really engage and understand it, not just kind of take the answer for granted. Like, this is going to be a great way for our customers to use it. So thanks for taking us through this. We're going to end today with a look at our capabilities around language localization. And so, certainly can seem simple on the surface, right? But, we've seen that this has a great big impact on adoption, especially for teams that, of non-English speakers. And so, for a lot of organizations, they're able to solve for, hey, employees have access to this or to Bloomfire. Now, getting that experience more intuitive, approachable for people across the world to use it comfortably, that's what this is trying to address. So, David, I'll let you jump in and just, speak a little bit to how Bloomfire is supporting those global teams.
Yeah, I think it starts with recognizing there's a real source of friction. An English-only interface can create adoption challenges for a lot of users. Even when employees may understand some English, navigating a product interface in a non-native language, it adds to the cognitive load. Menus feel less intuitive, system labels can be unfamiliar, onboarding takes longer, and then adoption can vary from one region to another. And in a lot of cases, the underlying knowledge may be useful and relevant, but if the interface feels harder to navigate for non-native speakers or non-native English-speaking individuals, that creates friction, and that creates the friction before they even get to the content. So that slows onboarding, that reduces confidence, and that can create regional adoption gaps.
Samir, I probably sound like a broken record, but why is this capability important to prioritize from your vantage point?
We want Bloomfire to work well for global organizations. The platform has to feel usable and familiar across regions, not just technically available. And so that's why we're launching multi-language support, allows our users to experience the product in their preferred language. It's an important step in reducing friction for international teams and making the platform more accessible for non-English speaking users. With multi-language support, navigation menus appear in the selected language, buttons and system labels are translated, and the interface just becomes easier to use and move through for users in their native language.
Yeah, I mean, the knowledge stays the same, but the experience is what becomes more accessible. So it doesn't change the knowledge layer itself. It changes how approachable the platform feels to the user, and that can make a huge difference for comfort, for speed, and for adoption, like we've mentioned. So I'll go ahead and share my screen, and I'll jump in to kind of do a really quick example of how this comes to life. So I'll navigate to my user settings, and I'm able to set my preferred language for just me. And I'll switch to one of our in preferences, I'll switch to Japanese. And so, once I do that, you can see that the interface is updated. Navigation, menus, buttons, system labels, everything is now in Japanese. And the key, though, is that the structure hasn't changed. It's just the presentation. And so the workflows are the same, the functionality is the same, but the interface becomes even easier to navigate for a Japanese native speaking user. And that matters a lot for onboarding and day-to-day usability, especially for teams that want broader adoption across multiple regions. And it helps improve one of the most quiet barriers that otherwise might slow usage. And sometimes the issue is not that the employees don't see the value, it's that the experience feels less natural than it should. And localization is really helping to remove that friction. So here, again, the value is pretty clear for me. So it's faster onboarding, it's increased global adoption, and a more inclusive experience for users across regions. We're all about making Bloomfire easier to use, easier to adopt, and more welcoming for global teams.
Yeah, thanks, David. Looking at that language localization, as a former Bloomfire customer and somebody who's led global teams at several very large companies, I think this is going to be really well received and a real game changer for a lot of those global teams. So, as we wrap up today, maybe the big takeaway is this: future of knowledge management. It's certainly evolving beyond storing content, and it's about creating an enterprise system that can be trusted, that can be actionable, and that can be accountable and ultimately accessible, right? And so hopefully what you've seen today is how Bloomfire is evolving to support that vision, a vision we tend to call enterprise intelligence. So with content reliability, organizations can really strengthen that quality of the corpus of knowledge under their foundation. With Synapse, we're turning that information and knowledge into faster answers and more usable outputs. With Learn and Confirm, we're closing that loop between communication and understanding. And with language localization, it's just going to be all that much more inclusive and scalable across global teams. So taken together, these capabilities are going to help organizations move from simply managing knowledge, right, and into more of an operational stance in a way that supports their people, but also supports all these AI tools and their businesses more effectively. So I'm excited, to have been your host today. We're going to be coming back to you in the near future with some additional innovation. Samir mentioned knowledge gap identification and more detailed citations coming soon. our unified search experience, and new moderation tools and workflows. So a quick reminder, you'll receive the on-demand recording shortly after this. And if you're ready to explore how Bloomfire can help you turn your organization knowledge into that living, searchable, trusted asset, we'd love to connect. If you're a current customer that wants to see more, love to hear more from you. Thanks again to everyone for joining today's session. It's always a pleasure, and we're really excited to continue the conversation. Have a great week.